You got a new job. Job orders. You have to move to DC. Yay! That is so exciting. And you're probably super excited until you realize, oh my God, I have kids. How am I going to move those little stinkers? Because they're not as easy to uproot as life is when you're just by yourself or when they're babies and you can just pack up and go. Well, first of all, I want you to take a deep breath. I've raised my kids here. It's not all downtown and city living. There's all kinds of different urban, suburban lifestyles that you have to choose from here in this area. And then second, if city living isn't for you, we've got Maryland and Virginia here, and they offer a range of different lifestyle options for you. Some places in Maryland and Virginia have more of a city feel than DC, which we're going to learn about today. And some have, some parts are more rural, and then a lot of it is very suburban. So you've got all kinds of different styles here that can satisfy what you are looking for. The other good news is that unlike other areas and cities, not all the jobs are in downtown DC. So you may have already found that you're commuting to other areas. A lot of times people have orders, they're going to go work at the Pentagon if they're State Department, or there's other places like Tyson's Corner, which has a ton of businesses there, or everything out to the Dulles Corridor where there's a lot of tech. So we're going to talk about all the different areas where you could possibly look for to live with your family. Can't forget the kids. Let's kick this off with what it's like living in DC. Well, DC is a city, but it's not a city like you would see in other areas where all of the businesses downtown, everybody commutes to a certain location downtown, and it's all high rises and condos. It's not really like that. It's very densely populated for sure. We have condos here close to downtown. We also have row homes and we have single family houses. Now, before I go on, you're probably about to ask me, what's a row home? Well, a row home is essentially this. They're attached houses. They were built in a time that predates any type of homeowners association legislation. When homeowners associations and condos kind of came into existence, like in the mid 1900s and the 1960s or so, that was really another form of ownership where the county government would approve a subdivision, but then they would say, we're not going to maintain the roads, so you're going to have to collect fees from each of these homeowners, and they're going to have to contribute to maintaining their community. And the reason is because it's more dense population, and the county doesn't have, the services essentially to take all of that on. So they put the onus back onto the homeowners association, and as such, the homeowners association collects a monthly fee that you'll see for that. Out in the suburbs, we see that a lot more because the housing stock's newer. But in DC, where our houses can be 90, over 100 years old, these are considered row homes, and they do not have any type of homeowners association fee or anything with them for the most part. Sometimes the neighborhoods get together and collect a little bit of something if they've got common space that they all share. And then you also have to maintain really your front yard as well as any backyard that you might have. That's all on you, which is similar to a townhome in a homeowners association community. You also have to do the sidewalk in front, so you got to rake leaves, you have to get the snow up and shovel the snow, and then also typically the strip of grass between the sidewalk and the street is also yours to maintain. These row homes can go all the way up to 4,000 square feet, but that's actually not the norm. You'll see those in the places of the city that were developed more in the early 1900s. And that's like DuPont Circle, Logan Circle, Woodley Park. There's these very grand dame kind of homes where, they are huge. Everybody lived there, staff lived there in addition to families, maybe multiple generations lived there, and they're very large houses. A lot of those have been cut up in the last 10, 20 years into condos, so you don't see as much of them anymore, but they still definitely exist. So you do have homes that are that big. I live in Glover Park, which I've talked about in many of my videos. Our houses here are more moderate. They're 1,400 square feet to about 2,200 at most. Ours is 1,600, not including the basement, which might be like another 300 square feet. I don't know. I'm sitting in the basement now, but I don't have a tape measure, so I can't measure it for you. And then you do have single family homes in other neighborhoods like Brookland. You've got them in AU Park, which is American University Park. Those have front yards, they've got side yards. This is where you're gonna see your picket fences. Might have garages. A lot of times they have street parking, or you go in from the alley and park in a driveway or a garage that you access from the back of the house. So you definitely have all kinds of living here in DC. So schools. So I could talk forever about the schools, and I have other videos on DC schools. I have one about the lottery, which is pretty important to take a look at. And I have another one where I've sort of vented my frustration about DC schools and how they handle things. I'm not a huge fan, but if you're insulated with your specific school and your principal and your staff and administration are great, then you're typically fine because you've got, a barrier from that. Some schools in DC are really well regarded. They have a high in-boundary rate, which means a lot of the people that go there, kids that go there, are from the neighborhood. They're not having to pull or fill seats from other neighborhoods because the neighborhood doesn't view the school as good or have good merit. We can dive a whole lot deeper in that on a very specific chat based on what your specific needs are. Just know that if you want a place to start, the DC, like all demographic and boundary information is on DC's website. They do maintain that. They do share all of that, so you can check all of that out. Generally, you're going to find that the city is incredibly international, very, very diverse, very mixed, right? So you're not going to feel like your kid is the only orange child at the school when everybody else is a red child. It's not like that, right? I'm obviously picking colors of, that people's skin are not, but anyway. And then in addition to that, you'll see that some schools might be 30% in boundary. Some schools are 90% in boundary. And we should kind of cover what that means for the kids as well as what it means for property values and for the adults. So when you see a school that's 30% in boundary, that can be for a number of reasons, right? So it can be because there's just maybe an older demographic in the neighborhood. Like I feel about Georgetown, there might be just an older demographic, people who've already raised their kids, so they don't have kids going to school, and there's not enough kids in the neighborhood to fill the school and the seats that are there, so they do pull from other neighborhoods. And we'll talk about the lottery and how they do that. But then you might have other neighborhoods where they're just not a lot of in-boundary students because maybe that's not as well regarded of a school. And these are all things that we can research and figure out, and especially tailor to what makes the most sense for you. In DC, I generally find that there's not as much of a correlation between property value and the school that's in the neighborhood we will see out in the suburbs. And the reason for that is because we have public schools, charter schools, and a lottery that governs those. Okay, quick note on this. If you are in a neighborhood and you are zoned for a school and you want to go there from kindergarten through 12th grade, you are guaranteed a spot no matter when you come, no matter how packed the school is, you will have a seat there. If you want to go to pre-K, of which DC offers free pre-K at every school that we've got pre-K at 4 years old. Some schools start at 3 years old, and that's just neighborhood dependent. If you want to go to pre-K, if you want to go to a school that is not in your neighborhood, so you say you live here and school A is here, but you actually want to go to school B because you heard they have a better whatever, or whatever the case may be, you want to go to that school, then you would go to the lottery. Same thing, charter. Anybody going to a charter, doesn't matter where you live, if the charter's across the street from your house, there's no such thing as a charter boundary. You're not zoned for a charter. Charter is a completely separate situation. They are actually managed by a charter board or a charter, charter school administration. They're not managed by DC public schools. It's just everything's a different setup. You would enter the lottery, you go in, it's like any lottery, you select your choices and then you see what you get, and wait lists come out in March and then everything moves. Like I said, I have another video completely on the lottery that I did. Not much has changed since I recorded that video a few years ago. I bring a bottle of wine to that video. You might want to as well, because it does get a little confusing for people who are new to the area. But I just wanted you to know that that exists and we can talk about that. I could talk about that for years, actually. And I will if you let me. All right, let's move on to what happens if you don't want to live in DC. What if you want a single family home? What if you need more space? Well, Virginia, we can start there. So Virginia has areas that are really closer to downtown DC than you'll see in Maryland. If you look at a map of the Beltway, there's really a lot more of Virginia that is inside the Beltway. The reason being because the original city actually did include Arlington and Alexandria, the city of Alexandria, as part of the nation's capital. And then in the mid-1800s, the Virginia side retroceded back out and became Virginia and disassociated themselves with the rest of us slobs over here on this side of the river. So anyway, you've got parts that are very close to downtown DC. Like I said, Arlington, City of Alexandria, and then the eastern parts of Fairfax, like McLean, Falls Church. Those areas are also very close inside the Beltway. And so that's why people look to, essentially, when they want more space, they'll go there. Other counties, you've got Prince William County and Loudoun County. People live there, like pre-pandemic, a lot of people would live in Prince William and commute daily to DC. Loudoun's a little bit farther, so that's a little bit tougher of a commute. But now post-pandemic, we're seeing that a lot of people that lived in these areas maybe only come to DC once a week or, once or twice a month, something like that. And they're choosing to live out there because you can get more for your money in terms of land and house. Schools are very good out there. Like the school systems are very, very good. And so people are, they look to move out there as well because they want, more space and more flexibility. Arlington and Alexandria are a lot more urban. Even North Arlington, though, is a lot different than the rest of Arlington. Like the central sort of part of Arlington, just on the North and South Arlington border, which is along Route 50, that's a lot of condos and very highly dense living. The northern part of Arlington has much bigger houses. These houses have yards. There's neighborhood parks. It's definitely more suburban feeling. And then the south part of Arlington, or South Arlington, is like more urban feeling. Like you'll definitely see a mix of condos and townhouses. And it just kind of depends, really, a combination of, what you want for yourself in terms of lifestyle and schools and neighborhood and all of that. The draw to Arlington, well, is because the proximity to DC, Tyson's, and like I said, schools are good. So Arlington County has pretty good school rankings and a pretty good reputation. The only thing that we universally kind of hear about Arlington is that while they offer services for students that might have learning disabilities or otherwise, they're not great at implementing them. So you really do have to advocate for your child and advocate hard for services. But I also know that people have left DC because they felt the same way and gone to Arlington because what they offer in Arlington is better. So your mileage, of course, may vary on this, but it's something to look into if this applies to one of your kiddos. So the city of Alexandria is totally different. It's got a different vibe. There's different neighborhoods that feel different. Some feel very just residential and have very good sense of community. Others, like Old Town, maybe feel like, okay, people live here, but this isn't necessarily like a lot of families living here because it feels like it's more touristy. It's kind of like you go to Old Town, you have lunch there, you feel like you're on vacation, even if you live in the area. And I don't want to sit here and say that like a school district is not as well regarded, but Alexandria City has had a lot of changes. They have a new superintendent finally this year. So going into the 2023-24 school year, there is a new superintendent. So there's a lot of change happening, and this is just kind of like something to keep your eye on and see if it gets better. But generally, you don't hear people say, I'm moving to the city of Alexandria because I want my kids to go to those schools. It's just not something you hear. All right, so now let's talk about Fairfax County. Fairfax County, there's a lot of towns, a lot of neighborhoods of all different kinds and varieties, right? So it's, there's very little, and I would say there's very little there that's a city, other than if you're like potentially looking at Tyson's Corner, which is very built up and feels very much like a city. So Fairfax County actually has one of the top school districts in the country. It's always coming up on the lists of everything saying how great it is. They've got AP, IB, they've got robust sports and all of that. And it's like everything that you could possibly want is going to exist in the schools in Fairfax County. They have a new superintendent as well. As of 2022, there's been some like questions of like that person's leadership ability, just because Fairfax County has been on such a good trajectory for so long. I can never say that word. I don't know why I chose to put it in the video. But there's also been staff attrition to surrounding districts because people just aren't happy. I mean, this stuff always happens. And so people are ending up either in Loudoun or Prince William County to just kind of go for something different. And I'm not really sure if they're solving one problem but getting another problem. Loudoun County has also, even though the school district has been really great and they've got really great schools there, and places like Ashburn and stuff, they're just great suburbs. They've got really nice houses and excellent schools. The only downside, of course, is that the Loudoun County administration hasn't handled things very well. Like there's been assaults and incidents in school that they've just taken a kid and moved him from one place to another, like went to a school, attacked a girl, got moved out of that school. Teachers had logged how much of a problem this was, and they still continued to move the student around to different schools and not kind of do anything about it, right? And unfortunately, this is kind of a situation that we're seeing in other schools as well. We had it in our own school, right? Where a student is potentially violent or dangerous, but they have a legal right to be in the school. So the school doesn't know how to handle this. And to find out as a parent that your child might be in danger, I have a problem with that. So watching you, Loudoun County Schools, because that wasn't handled very well. Some of those people had to resign as a result of it. And some are being sued. So there's lawsuits now as well. So the school board in Fairfax County is actually up for re-election the fall of 2022. So stay tuned kind of what happens there. There's been some lawsuits from families who have children with special education needs, saying that there's no support for their kids with their IEPs, which is the Individualized Education Plan. Fairfax County also had a big scandal last year because the students who won the National Merit Award were never actually told that they won the National Merit Award and notified by this. And as you can imagine, that was a disaster because it didn't end up on those college applications. And by the time all of this came out, apps were done, everybody was in, they were accepted, and they had already chosen where they were going to college. And that was a huge fail on the part of Fairfax County because it really potentially did alter people's lives. So what's the moral of the story? You always have to advocate really hard for your kids. It's like unbelievable that I didn't want to be the parent to have to be in the middle of the thick of it, but it's like now I'm the parent in the middle of the thick of it. And I'm not even trying to get my kids to Harvard. Like right now I've got my sights set on like community college. I don't know. Anyway, so the other thing about Fairfax County is there's not as many blue ribbon schools as we're going to see when we head up to Montgomery County. Last, by my count, they had 7 blue ribbon schools in Fairfax County. So now let's move on to Montgomery County up in Maryland. And you're probably going to ask, why am I sort of only covering these 2 areas? Well, definitely because they're areas I service. I think Loudoun and Prince William sort of deserve a larger conversation in terms of schools, but we could cover that in something separate, and we can also sort of pinpoint and drill down to what you're actually looking for to figure out. A lot of this is going to depend on price point, right? Like Fairfax County houses carry a certain price point. A lot of them are going to be 700-800s and higher. And if people come and they say like, look, I'm looking in the 500 to 600s, we are going to be looking in Prince William County, potentially Loudoun, just depending on where work is going to be. So that's why that. So now Maryland, we're going to move to Montgomery County and kind of focus there. So what do you have in Montgomery County? We have Bethesda and Silver Spring, which are very close to DC, inside the Beltway. They are as much of a city as you're going to get a feel for. Silver Spring, way more of a city feel than even Bethesda, which is more like urban, suburban kind of feel. So you've got all living types here. Condos, townhomes, single family homes. Everything is here. There's even as far in north in Montgomery County, you'll find things that are more rural feeling as well. Why do people move here? It's more affordable than Virginia. It didn't used to be like this, but it's kind of shaken out this way. And that's really because Virginia seems to get a whole lot more in terms of employers, right? There's a whole tech corridor out to Dulles where there's just so much business and so many corporate headquarters that are located in Virginia. And Montgomery County just doesn't have claim to that. They've got a few like Discovery's there, Marriott's there, National Institute of Health is there, but unless you're working at something specifically close by, or you want to grab the metro and go to downtown DC, this is like a different conversation that we are definitely having. So people move here for more affordability and for the space. They're going to move here for the schools, right? So there's a lot of top-notch schools in Montgomery County. There's a whole system too in the county where they have a consortia of high schools. So as long as you're within that consortia, you can pick one of the several high schools, and they're constantly making changes to that, which, can benefit. And the reason that they do that is so that they can kind of mix up and not have specific areas that might just have one socioeconomic status, and then everybody in that school, it's not diverse, right? So they've done this to really promote diversity and make sure that they're kind of mixing everything up while giving everybody the opportunity that they want to go to a school that may offer a different focus than what is in their specific neighborhood and boundary. So some schools have a career and tech focus. You can find pretty much all AP and IB, which is the International Baccalaureate at classes at the various schools in the county. The county spends close to half its budget on schools in Montgomery County, which is really very telling, right? The other thing is that close to 90% of the staff in Montgomery County have advanced degrees beyond a bachelor's degree. Some are beyond a master's degree. So that's also pretty good. And then Montgomery County has claim to 39 blue ribbon schools, which is also pretty awesome, right? So there's trade-offs with everything. And these are just things that we have to talk about. But when you are going to move here, just know that you have a lot of options, right? Like that whole thing where you're priced out of Fairfax County, unless you're going to be like 700 and above, that's not the situation for Montgomery County. Like you can get into Montgomery County in the 5s and 6s still. So don't be alarmed that there's going to be like no options for you or anything like that. We can find you something and we can make that work with the school and the lifestyle that you want. So I am Melissa Terzis, DC Real Estate Mama. Contact info is coming next.